Hey, welcome back. It's a terrific Tuesday edition of Liquid Lunch on Newsmax TV. I'm John Tobacco. Market's still raging. Bitcoin leveling off, but I think it holds the 9,000 level. There could be some legendary trading coming up. And speaking of legendary, yesterday was Money Monday, so we bring in the money big hitters on Mondays. But when Jim Awad's in town and he's available, he's a 50-year Wall Street expert. This guy knows it all. He knows where the bodies are buried, where the rubber meets the road. He's just like us. He's been in the back rooms, the ballrooms, the boardrooms. Jim Awad, straight from Fox, comes to join us. Thanks for
my pleasure.
Taking a little time for Liquid Lunch. And back on the not curvy couch, my co-host and managing editor, Frank Morano. So, Jim, the big news today is all the new craze.
Yeah.
It's this crypto stuff. And
right.
I hate to have someone of your expertise 50 years long here and talk about such a new thing, but
right.
It's minds like yours that'll probably figure out ways to adopt this and take it to the next level.
So,
what do you think?
So big picture, I mean, younger people will give you more of the technical aspects and what could go right and wrong.
Yep.
But it looks like the first real legitimate effort to legitimize the blockchain technology. I think everybody has been intrigued by the technology, but Bitcoin itself has become more of a speculative stock, and they seem to have addressed many of the issues people were worried about: governance, stability of price, business model to make money on it. So what you would say from a portfolio manager's top-down view, it looks like the first chance to make this a legitimate change the world technology business model. It'll be in the execution and the adoption, but you have to like what you've seen in the last 24 hours.
Well, I respect your expertise, but I do want to point out that I was the vice president of technology for tZero,
right,
which is a subsidiary of Overstock.com. And Dr. Patrick Byrne was one of the first adopters when Overstock accepted it as a cryptocurrency, as a payment form. I think he sped up the adoption, but Overstock's a much more obscure company than Facebook, and I think some of that acceleration happened. Now there's regulations around it, which is important. 5 years ago there were no regulations. How important it is to have somebody like Trump being in the markets and how they over-regulate it? How important it is for him to kind of loosen regulation?
I think part of whatever success Trump has had in the economy, and he's had a fair amount, has been through deregulating, where you can deregulate without taking unfair advantage of the consumer and the buyer. It's a middle ground, as people say. It's capitalism with barriers, with sideboards, so it doesn't go overboard. But I think that whether you like Trump or not, business people, capitalists have to admire and respect his bent towards deregulation, and it has unleashed some animal spirits in the economy.
Absolutely. And
ratcheted up the growth rate. You know, Jim, we have been talking a lot about the Federal Reserve, and the president seems very frustrated with the Federal Reserve. He doesn't like that they raised interest rates. This is what he's saying as president. He was singing a different tune as a candidate, and we've been debating what's appropriate for the Fed to do. What do you think the Fed will do today, and what's your view in terms of what they should do?
Okay, so I think they should not lower the rate at the current time, but that they should loosen the language, take out patient, which I think many people expect, give a hint going forward through the dot plot that indicates that the inflation and the economy are going to grow slower than they believed a few months ago. Recognize that, retain flexibility to adapt to that. But I think there are two reasons that they shouldn't lower rates. Maybe they will, but I hope they don't. A, because they need the ammunition in the next downturn to be effective, and B, because it would look like that they're bowing to Trump's political pressure, which I think would denigrate the Federal Reserve and reduce their capability. So they're being reasonable people. My guess is they will do nothing, but indicate that the forecasts are lower for longer than they did before, and that it's likely, although not guaranteed, that the next move will be to ease rather than to tighten. And I think the markets will be satisfied if that's the message that they give.
I've been a big advocate with your friend Stuart Varney, also with Neil Cavuto for years now, to say raise the rates, because when the rates were so low, the big banks were borrowing money from the government at zero. They were buying treasuries and making 2.5%. It was like a Ponzi.
You're right.
And there was no reason for banks to take risk. And I feel like now that the rates are going up, there is no inflation to really worry about. But the higher the rates go up, the more willing banks are to make small business loans, take a little more risk. And I think access to capital is one of the things we always talk about here. So keep building some fat in. If there is emergency, I don't mind raising a little
Right.
bit. That's the way I think.
Well, I would hope that the economy is good enough over the next 12 months so that market psychology will adjust and anticipate maybe one more rate increase rather than all these reductions that I think are unrealistic that the market is expecting. But what's happening is the rates are collapsing overseas, and inflationary expectations are collapsing overseas, and inflation expectations here are declining. So that's pulling our rates down lower than just a focus on the domestic economy would indicate. So I would hope that it develops so that before this cycle is over, they can raise once more. But unfortunately, we are hostage to what's going on globally around the world. But I agree with you. If they had one more bullet in their holster to counter the next downturn, it's preferable. And I think they would lose credibility if they lowered now.
We have
they would
no
lose
more
credibility.
bullets in the holster. Jim Maywald, thank you. Back right
Pleasure.
after this.